In this video, we're going to solve quadratic equations by factoring with a leading coefficient greater than 1. So you can see we have a leading coefficient of 2. And we're going to use factor by grouping here. Anytime I have a leading coefficient greater than 1, I use factor by grouping. And we learned this in the first unit. So let's take and rewrite this. And let's take 2 times 3. So we take, for factor by grouping, we take 2 times negative 3. And you get negative 6. And then we find the factors of negative 6 to add to negative 1. What are the factors of negative 6? Well, we get negative 3 and 2, or we get 3 and negative 2. We get 1 and negative 6, and we get negative 1 and 6. If we add these up, I get negative 1 for this first piece. So these are the factors I'm going to use here, negative 3 and 2. So I'm going to write this as 2x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 3. Now, these terms don't matter how I write them. They still add up to negative x. So I haven't changed the equation. I've just rewritten it so it's 4 terms instead of 3. And the reason I've done that is now we're going to do the factor by grouping. We're going to group the 2 factors on the left and the 2 factors on the right together, and we're going to factor something out of them. So I'm going to factor an x out of the first 2 because they both have an x in them. So I have x, and when I factor it out, I'm essentially dividing it out. So I end up with 2x when I divide it by x minus 3 when I divide 3x by x. Now this is already 2x minus 3, so what I'm factoring out is just a positive 1. So I have plus 1, and that's 2x minus 3. Now, if I get 2x minus 3, or I get the same terms inside the parentheses, then factor by grouping is working. If I don't get the same thing, then factor by grouping is not working, and it might be an equation that is, or a quadratic that is not factorable. So, now that I have 2x minus 3 in both terms, I'm going to factor that out. Okay, so here I factored each 2 sets of terms. Now I'm going to factor 2x minus 3 out. I get 2x minus 3 written out front. If I divide that out of this, I'm left with x for the first term, and I'm left with a plus 1 when I divide it out of the second term. Now you can see that I have this factored. If I multiply this back out, I get 2x squared minus 3x plus 2x would be the negative x piece, and then negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. So I have factored this quadratic. Now I want to solve it, so I'm going to use the zero product property like in the previous videos, ZPP. So that means that 2x minus 3 is equal to 0, or x plus 1 is equal to 0. Solve each individually, so add 3 over, so I get 2x equal 3, then divide by 2. X is equal to 3 halves, or we subtract 1 on each side and I get x is equal to negative 1. So my 2 solutions would be x is equal to 3 over 2 or x is equal to negative 1. Let's do a second example. We have 3 and 15 here, so I'm going to take 3 times 15. Let's rewrite this here, 3x squared minus 14x plus 15 equals 0. And we're going to do factor by grouping. So I get 3 times 15, which is 45. Let's factor the 45 into all the possible factors. We're trying to get negative 14, so we're going to use negative numbers. So I'm going to have negative 9 and negative 5. Well, that already equals negative 14. I can see that there when I add them together. So negative 9 and negative 5 work. So I'm going to use 3x squared minus 9x minus 5x plus 15. Again, negative 9x and 5x added together is negative 14. So I have not changed the equation. Let's factor something out of each set of terms. I'm going to factor a 3x out of the first 2 terms, and that would be x minus 3 left when I divide 3x out of each of those. Factor a negative 5 out here, and I end up with x minus 3. let's factor x minus 3 out. And when I do that, I get x minus 3. When I divide x minus 3 out of this term, I get 3x left. Divided out of this term, I get negative 5. I have two binomials being multiplied and they equal 0. So now we'll use the zero product property. And we can say x minus 3 is equal to 0, or 3x minus 5 is equal to 0. Add the 3 to the other side, I get x equal to 3, or add 5, I get 3x is equal to 5 when I add it to the other side. Divide by 3 on each side, I get x is equal to 5/3. So my two possible solutions here are x equal 3 and x equal 5/3.